Mitch.
Peter.
Stefan.
Great to seeing you here, guys.
Great to see you.
Great seeing you.
What a fantastic morning here in the Southwest Florida, meeting both of you with those unique rides.
Yep.
Thank you. We have a chance here, Peter. I met Stefan at a car show.
Yes.
And we had the opportunity to put our cars together and realized that perhaps we had a perspective on history not a lot of people get, because we had the civilian version, the everyday version, the car that Ford and Mercury sold on Monday that people bought because this car went on Sunday. And back then a stock car was a little bit closer to being a stock car than they are today. If you look at a stock car, race car today, there's not a single part on that car that came off a production line Toyota Camry or Ford Mustang. But when you look at this 1968 Mercury Cyclone, and you look at this 1968 Mercury Cyclone, they share 40% common parts. Pretty hard to believe when you think about going 200 miles over here.
Yes.
Or buying it at the dealership like a lady named did in 1968. So it's kind of neat that we have these two cars together at once, so you can see how this became this, and how the success of this, and the school teacher buying this in 1968.
What a story. I mean, I still cannot believe. I remember the day I passed you at the car show. I'm like, I haven't seen that type of car before. You walk me through exactly. You start chatting immediately. Mercury Cyclone 69.
This is a 1968 model. And what's
68.
In 1968. And this car, this body style, was shared between the Mercury Cyclone and the Ford Torino. And if you look at the front of this car, this is really the beginning of aerodynamic effect in NASCAR. Ford was up against the 426 Hemi. It made a lot of power. Dodges were going fast. And Dodge won it all in 1967. In 1968, this body style showed up. Basically, a wing on a mid-size Ford. The heart of this car, a Ford Fairlane, a taxi cab, an everyday driving car. The 63H body style, the fastback, made all the difference. And in 1968, without any more aerodynamics than blocking off the front bumper, these cars won everything going in NASCAR. And the bottom line is, you could go to a dealership on Monday and buy a car that looked just like, say, the car that Cale Yarborough drove to win the Daytona 500. This one, he was a school teacher in 1968.
Wow.
High school in Tennessee. And she went to the local Ford dealer and bought this from stock. And you couldn't buy much less Mercury Cyclone. This is just a 302 two-barrel engine making 210 horsepower with a 3-speed manual transmission. So Vera bought a car with a single option, a remote driver's mirror. Now the Cyclone GT option got you the fastback, got you bigger stabilizer bar, bigger springs, power drum brakes. And at the end of the day, I put everything together on this car just like it was new, and it drove just like a 1968 Mercury Cyclone. So to make this into this, well, there's a lot of work to be done. But 40% of this is still in here. Now, Stefan, who enjoys this car, I'd like him to tell you a little bit about finding and falling in love with this. The great thing is to find yourself in a set of circumstances where you have two real pieces of history together, where you find a 55,000 mile 1968 Mercury Cyclone, pretty much the way old left it behind. I discovered it in a garage in Detroit, and on a cold Friday, traded my paycheck for the car.
Wow.
And
what a story.
You go forward 20 years, and I still have the car. I've been through it mechanically. Now it's a 4-barrel. Now it has a 4-speed transmission. I've got it driving as well as an old 68 Mercury can drive. But the real moment was showing up at a Immokalee Casino in Florida this year and meeting Stefan and getting to put our cars together, because they represent something that was true but isn't true anymore. And when they won cars, when they had race cars that won on Sunday, why they sold on Monday, and that's why they're about this. And so to find Stefan and see this car and put them back to back and see how this became that and how they were related is special. Stefan, this is a special car, and I love having it here. How did you come across this car.
I agree and disagree with you.
Oh!
Both are special cars. There is not probably another one in the world like this one. 4 of them got produced back in the days by Bud Moore, who was a famous NASCAR owner and builder. 4 got destroyed. So this one is basically worldwide the only really close reproduction we have.
That's an important word. People say replica. It's not a replica. This, if Tiny Lund got into this car, I'm confident he would know it wasn't his car. And we'll crawl over it here a little bit later, and you'll see, Stefan, it's a race car.
It is a race car, basically. The guy who did build it in the 90s. I have a documentation that big about the build of the car. He built it really close, very close to the 4 original cars. He constantly contacted Bud Moore, the car owner back in the days, and let him know what he did and if that's accurate. And Bud Moore told him yes or no. You do it different, you do it the way you did it. So it was very close to the original. But here's the thing. This is the racing version, but to find somebody with the same street version is probably the one time in your life you're gonna meet that thing. Because as you told me, these cars were so unique, even every car by itself, but to find two cars in the same state, Florida, is basically, you will never do that in another life.
So you can imagine just how I was excited. I'm meeting him, then a few weeks later, we're setting up a little meet. Of course, both of us are busy, but then he's coming back and he's saying, I have something special. And I'm always feeling the same way, like be patient and something will line up. This was line up here exactly. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
One of the things about these 2 cars is in 1968, that was the beginning of the aerodynamic revolution. And we all know about the Dodges with the big nose and the big wing on the back and the Torino Talladegas and the Cyclone spoiler too. But those weren't around in 1968. This was the beginning of all of that. Simply blocking off the front of this car. The aerodynamic design was built into it, and it was fast from the get. And what's more amazing is, as they developed the aerodynamics, and you NASCAR folks don't know, but these cars were so dominant in 1968 that Richard Petty drove a Ford Torino, not a Dodge or a Chrysler. What led next to the aerodynamic revolution was Chrysler saying, how do we match the Cyclone with the body of the cars that we have? And they actually went to a rocket engineer, and he designed the nose and the wing that made those huge Dodge Super Bs so dynamic in appearance and so fast on the racetrack. And Ford's and Mercury's answer to that was to extend the nose of the Cyclone and square it off, take the back bumper off, and put it on the front. And that's all they had to do. And to this day, and I know some of you 426 Hemi fans will disagree, but people have taken the Cyclone and they've taken the Dodge and they put them back to back with all the horsepower in the world, and they took them to the salt flat. The Cyclone's still a little faster, guys. I hate to tell you.
Interesting story. I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
It might be the reason because the Dodges have this big rear spoiler which produces a lot of downforce. And downforce, of course,
Traction.
It's good for the corners, but not for the straights.
And when you look at these cars, and you look at the modern NASCAR, and you look at the back of the car, you're going to see a huge spoiler across the back of the car, producing a large amount of downforce to create traction in the corners. But when you look at the back of the Mercury Cyclone and the Torino Talladega, you're not going to see 4 inches of spoiler creating monumental amounts of downforce. They actually kind of flew the back end of this car around the track. All the magic was happening right up here in the right front. They were driving the right front of this car. The back end was along for the ride. And the old NASCAR guys will tell you, they got a little light in the back end at speed because the back end was flying around the track at 200 miles an hour.
Wow.
You know what we haven't really talked about is the things that make a 1968 Mercury Cyclone into a 1968 NASCAR. So we'll go from front to back and talk about it a little bit. The front end design stays the same. You got the headlights, they're covered up. You got an air inlet for the oil cooler. You block off the lower part of the bumper, and that's it. Unfortunately, when you take the 68 Mercury Cyclone, you take the hood, you take the fenders, and you take the gussied up stuff up here, and you cut the whole thing off in front of the firewall and make a race car in the front of the car. And that's what this is. Full body on frame, 4 shock absorbers in the front, huge stabilizer bars, huge coil springs, weight jacking in all the corners, suspension adjustment, shims everywhere. The whole front end of the car is pure race. The engine is set off to the right. The whole front of the car is set off to the right. It took me 2 hours of weight jacking just to take the car from its track setup and get the front end level. But, unlike today's cars, the hood's metal, and it was made by Ford, and those fenders are metal, and they were made by Ford. And that bumper, that's the bumper that came on this car, and it's right over here. As you start your way back, the doors are there, and they're metal, and they're the doors that came on the car when it came from the factory. The roof's the same metal, the trunk's the same metal, the floor's the same metal, the body panel's the back, the same metal, the shocks in the back, 4 of them instead of just 2. And by the way, the springs mount in exactly the same location, metal on metal. Nothing fancy about that rear suspension. Everything else is full race, and the car drives like a race car. There are 16 mechanical points between the body and the car, your butt, and the road. And they're all solid metal, although they did eat a little grease over the last week, didn't they, Stefan? What's it like driving this car, Stefan?
It is fun. You know, I'm a race car guy all my life. So I grew up with race cars. My dad raced, my bigger brother raced, so I grew up with race cars.
In Germany, yes?
All over Europe. I raced all over Europe, and when I was about 25, I raced all over the world for many years.
Yeah, but let's start with that you're from Germany, yes?
I'm from Germany. I was born and raised in Munich. But
Munich, I love Munich. You know, I mentioned I'm from Poland, so 45 minutes from the border with Germany. Yeah.
It is a nice city, very relaxed. A big city, 1.5 million people, but still kind of relaxed. So I love it, but Florida is our home now, and we are really happy here.
Yeah, you got addicted to the sun, and this that you have car culture here 365, not just during summer or spring.
I just think it's wonderful. You would say I'm as American as apple pie, but I was born in Europe, you know, came across on a ship, and that the 3 of us are sitting here from so many different places, but enjoying this moment and these cars really says something about car culture. And learning that it's always been and it always will be. And whether those young guys are driving Datsuns or rebuilding this or that or Volvos going fast around the track, it doesn't matter. Car guys are car guys. And regardless of your accent or where you're sitting, look at us. We're sitting here in Naples, Florida.
You're talking about my accent? There is no accent.
What accent?
Over here with Peter, there's no accent.
So let me ask you, what was your favorite car you ever drove besides this one?
There is no favorite car. I didn't have a favorite driver all my life. I admired so many different drivers. I loved so many cars. I started to collect later in my life when I was a businessman. I started to collect race cars. So in my peak times, we had 11 race cars. So, but it was a lot to manage, a lot to maintain, a lot to transport. So we had that on a racetrack in the Netherlands. We put them all together for about 3 years in the Netherlands. I raced at the racetrack, different cars, different races. But after a couple of years, my wife and I decided to go to Florida, and here we are.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you very much.
Where you brought your cars, I believe. At least few.
No. A single one I brought. We sold all the rest.
Oh, yeah.
We sold all the other cars.
Which meaning that right now you're starting your collection.
I try not
to.
No, I'm with 2 race cars now, and I might sell one of the race cars. I might sell this one or the other race car, which is a 94 Chevy Lumina Skull Bandit car.
Oh, you don't need to tell twice to Mitch. Definitely will end up in even fits how we see here in his garage.
Well, you know, you air condition the garage, you paint the floor, and you invite your friends, and you never know what's going to happen. And the neighbors, I usually go knock on the door, and oh, by the way, folks, A full NASCAR exhaust in your garage is an attention getter. All your neighbors will know when you start it, and they'll know when you stop it. And oh, by the way, what a full NASCAR exhaust looks like is pretty amazing, because the headers come wrapping around the steering gearbox, which is, by the way, the one Ford put in this car. And they all come out to flat 4 tubes on either side, go into a giant collector, which is also flat, and then come out right here on the side. And lordy, lordy, it makes a wonderful noise.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to hear this. You mentioned the Rockabilly car show, what I've seen your car has, and when you fired this up, that was nice music.
It's V8, an open V8 exhaust. It's best music in my ears. I love music, but this is the better music.
Yeah.
The engines in these NASCAR cars of the late 60s from Ford were based on the FE family of engines. It's a 390 cubic inch engine, also bored and stroked out to 427, and 427 is what they ran in NASCAR. And Ford was in a bit of trouble because the 426 Hemi came around in 1967 and it put out a lot of power. And Ford had to go to work on that 390 to make it produce the kind of power that Chrysler was getting out of their Hemis. So they went with the 390, they bored and stroked it out to 427 cubic inches, and they went to work on the cylinder heads. And you'll hear the term low riser, medium riser, high riser, and what they're talking about are the cylinder heads for these Ford engines. And they had to go around the push rod for the intake valve. And so they went to a port design called the tunnel port. So you'll hear tunnel port, you'll hear medium riser, low riser, high riser, all referring to manifolds and parts of the 427 engine, all efforts by Ford to try and match the horsepower of the 426 Hemi. The fortunate part for Ford was coming up with this aerodynamic body style and really starting the aerodynamic revolution. A little credit goes to a guy named Fred Lorenzen. In 1967, he took a Ford Fairlane, a yellow car, they called it the banana car, and he was the first one to lower the body on the chassis and make the car truly aerodynamic. NASCAR got the attention of that pretty quickly and put a stop to that. But this car came along, the aerodynamic revolution was born, and you see it today. But it all started right here with these cars in 1968. Hard to think, but that's almost 60 years ago.
Yeah, time flies.
Time flies.
But they didn't change. They have timeless lines and built to last.
You know what's more amazing to me is that they retooled body styles so often. You know, you people who own Fox Body Mustangs, you know they didn't change a whole lot for 15 or 20 years. But this Mercury Cyclone body style, this big fastback, and its brother, the Torino from Ford, were only ran for 2 years, 1968 and 1969. In 1970, Ford changed the body style. They came with a concave rear back glass. They ran advertising that said the car was shaped by the wind and it was slower than this car on super speedway tracks, and people kept driving this body style until 1972. It is one of the most dominant body styles in NASCAR racing for its entire history.
Wow.
So they went backwards, even though they said it was shaped by the wind, the cars were slower. And guys went back to racing these, the Spoiler 2 and the Torino Talladega. An interesting note about people say, did the aerodynamics make a difference? In one of the races after NASCAR had outlawed aerodynamics, you were allowed to run an aerodynamic car like the Dodge with the big nose and the wing, but you had to use a small block engine. And in a race in, I believe, 1970 or 71, a driver decided to use a small block and take that slick body out there, and he ran in the top 5 all day. 130 cubic inches and probably 200 horsepower less, but that's how important aerodynamic design is in a race car. So it looks good, but it goes fast. Aerodynamics in race cars? 1968, Mercury Cyclone, Torino Talladega, and Steph and I get to share having them today, and we hope you enjoy seeing them here together and get an idea of what it meant to have these kind of cars back in the day and what it meant to win on Sunday, buy on Monday. And but the big difference was changing the upper control arm springs, bushings.
Now you said 5 manual, 4 speed manual.
And the car originally came with a 3-speed. it shifts up around the column.